Okay, well the interesting thing about the microbiome is it's a sophisticated network interplay with the immune system. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because that's a lot of the latest research that we've been doing is on the microbiome and how it interacts in terms of different health issues. So I want to talk about that as well because that's really a cutting edge science that we're working on right now. In fact, if you came to convention earlier this year, you found that we developed a product that's all about the microbiome, right? It's a microbiome product. And hopefully soon we'll be able to have that product as well. So the immune system is something that's sometimes hard to describe, right? When we talk about the immune system, are there particular organs that we think about? Like say for instance, cardiovascular system, right? When we say cardiovascular system, we think about the heart, right? Or the veins, or the arteries. If we think about the digestive system, we think about the stomach and the intestines. But when we say immune system, what are we really talking about? Are there specific tissues? Are there organs that define the immune system? And there's really not. There's not really a specific organ, there's not a specific tissue that's associated with the immune system. And really what it does is it encompasses our whole body. And that kind of makes sense because when you think about the primary purpose of our immune system, which is to neutralize harmful invaders, bacteria, viruses, environmental substances, when you think about it from that standpoint, we need our immune system everywhere on our body, right? Because all of these attackers, these invaders, they can come from anywhere, right? They can come from the air that we breathe, they can come from the food that we eat, or things that we touch, or even perhaps just in our body. We have to have a strong immune system to sometimes help promote the whole body system from attacking itself, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Now, the other aspect about the immune system, which I thought was really a visionary way to look at it, is that because the immune system touches so many areas of health, when David Lisby started the company 20 years ago, and he thought, how can I promote overall health in a very differentiating way? And that's when he came up with this idea of transfer factor. He'd heard about it, he'd read about it, and he recognized and he knew that this is an area of science that could have wide implications in our overall health. And so it has benefits that will manifest itself in many, many different ways and lead to overall better health. Now, another aspect of the immune system that sometimes doesn't get as much attention is the ability of our immune system to take care of our own cells. When our immune system isn't working, then sometimes bad things can happen. There's a lot of diseases that are associated with having a poor functioning immune system, and you may know what some of these are. A lot of the negative repercussions of having an underperforming immune system. And so that's another area where the immune system really helps us. Now, when we think about the immune system, there's really two components, and both of them are complementary. There is the innate immune system, which is a general defense against bacteria types of invaders. And one way to think about it is if you have an emergency situation, right, where you have some sort of attack going on, the innate immune system is really a general responder. They're kind of like the first responders of an accident, right? They are very general in their approach to helping things in an accident situation. They are non-specific. They work in a time-sensitive way, right? Time is of the essence when you have an attack going on. And so that's really kind of what we call our innate immune system. We also have an adaptive immune system. And that immune system learns from our past experiences, right? From our past attacks on how to fight harmful organisms. And in essence, what they're doing is they're educating themselves. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. So that's kind of the basics of the immune system. And now what I wanted to talk about is something new that we've been working on in the last few years, and that's called the microbiome. The microbiome so we all know that we have bacteria in our bodies, right? And some of that bacteria is good, and some of that bacteria is bad. if we have a lot of bad bacteria, that has a lot of health implications. If we have a lot of good bacteria, which sometimes we think about it in terms of probiotics, then that helps our health. And there's a sophisticated interplay between the immune system and the microbiome. In fact, there are some bacterial species that can actually activate the immune system. You can see that in this, what we call a cell-mediated immune response. The bacteria actually activates these cells and it goes through this whole network of identifying and taking care of invaders in our body. The other thing you think about in the microbiome is that the microbiome primarily happens in our gut. Most of the bacteria that we have in our bodies resides in our gut. And that's actually where about 70% of our immune cells live as well. And so you can see there's this connection that goes on. And then one interesting aspect that was just discovered, I would say, in the last 2 or 3 years in terms of our microbiome, is that really actually is a jump start to our immune system when we are born. There's been a lot of research looking at the microbiomes of newborns. And so when newborns are actually delivered through vaginal delivery, the mom is actually passing her microbiome onto the baby, and that's helped jump-starting the immune system. And if the baby is not born that way, or if it's born through, say, like a C-section, then what they found is that the immune systems of babies who are born through C-section is somewhat weaker than the immune systems of babies who are born through vaginal birth. And that's all because of the microbiome. And they can do these studies, they can look at the immune systems of these different categories of babies and notice significant differences in their immune system status. And so there's a really sophisticated interplay of the immune system as well as the microbiome. Now, the microbiome not only resides in the gut, it also resides in our oral cavity. And so a lot of the oral diseases, the oral issues that we have are because of an unbalanced microbiome within our mouth. So things like gingivitis, periodontitis, tooth decay, all of these things can be related and be correlated to our oral microbiome. We also have a microbiome on our skin. Our skin has bacteria that help protect us. Sometimes when it gets out of whack, we can have some issues with our skin. So like acne is related to our skin microbiome. And so you can see that over the course of all this investigation and see how this microbiome works, that it plays a really large role in terms of our overall health, in terms of weight management. It's a really strong component of our microbiome in terms of weight management. In fact, they did a study once where they took 2 twins who had essentially the same genetic DNA, but one twin was overweight and another twin was slimmer. And they took the microbiome of both twins and they did a transplant into mice. And what they found is that the mice who were transplanted into overweight twins, those mice actually became overweight, whereas the mice that was transplanted with the slender twin, they had normal, healthy lives. And so the microbiome has a major impact on many different health systems. Also in terms of our cardiovascular system, the component of the microbiome is impacted by our cardiovascular system. There's another component as well, our cognition. Our brain is actually impacted by our microbiome. And that kind of makes sense too, right? Because when you have stress and things happen, and you're starting to get worried or you get anxiety, things happen in your stomach, right? Your stomach gets a little uneasy, right? And that's this thing called the gut-brain axis. So there's things within our microbiome that also impact things that go on in our brain. So it's a very, very interesting area of research. It's something that we've looked at over the last few years. In fact, as we were developing our prebiotic, we actually looked at the microbiome to see what was it about the microbiome impacting diet and lifestyle. And in one of the papers that we found, I thought was very, very interesting, it looked at the microbiome of people from different parts of the world. And what you can see is when you look at the microbiome of people in North America, you can see that if you measure it in terms of this thing called diversity, microbiome diversity, that's really looking at the different numbers of bacteria within our microbiome and how diverse are they, how different are they. And it turns out that if the more different they are, the better off it is. And so when you look at the microbiome of people in North America, which typically have a very poor diet, right? It's called the Western diet. It's high fat, high sugar. What happens is that diversity goes down because all the food that they're taking in preferentially feeds the bad bacteria. And so the diversity actually goes down. And then when you look at people who are in South America or Africa, you notice that they have much wider diversity in terms of the microbiome, and they're generally considered healthy. And so this is an area of focus that we've been working on. We developed a product on it. We've been doing a lot of research in the microbiome, especially because it plays a large part in our immune system as well. So it makes sense for us to be studying this aspect of this as well. Okay, so now let's talk a little